Protocol has been observed. So, greetings to all. Let me say the ANC ports here in Dominica are located in vulnerable areas, and climate change impacts will continue to affect those ports and airports because they are built close to the coast and the shoreline, and they're not in sheltered areas as some ports in the region are. And they're also near the rivers and large drains which are susceptible to flooding, especially so during the hurricane season, where it is predicted that there will be an increase in the number and strength of storms, heavy rainfall, or unseasonal weather-related events, as was experienced recently with regards to Hurricane Maria, and not too long ago, also Tropical Storm Erica. So the CN airport's infrastructure, as a result, are highly subject to intense winds, impacts of sea level rise, Category 5+ hurricanes during the hurricane season, which results in extreme damage to the ports of entry given their location. We all know what happened on September 18th. We were struck by a Category 5+ hurricane with winds over 185 miles per hour, which caused catastrophic damage all over the island. The ports of entry were no exception, and the damages suffered was severe, $51 million EC. Given the importance of the port and airport, a business-as-usual approach was no longer viewed as a viable option after Hurricane Maria, because we had to be able to respond very quickly. So immediately after the hurricane, we set out to undertake the following: an initial assessment of all the ports, and that was done to determine the operational condition, to allow humanitarian aid and relief personnel to arrive as quickly as possible. This was done at Canefield and Douglas Charles Airport within 2 days of the storm. The Longhouse Port in the north and the Woodbridge Bay Port in the south also allowed relief and other supplies, along with military and other key personnel, to arrive on island to provide assistance within 3 days of that storm. Work began on the restoration of the facilities that could be utilized to store cargo for distribution. A helipad was set up at the Woodbridge Bay Port to facilitate movement of food and other essential supplies to persons with no road access at the time. On October 7th, because of the high risk of safety and other problems experienced at the Woodbridge Bay Cargo Port, we took a decision to move back to the ferry terminal, because immediately after the storm on September 22nd, we started operations of moving people out through the ferry utilizing the cargo port. But that became a serious safety challenge, and so we had to move to a more conducive environment utilizing temporary facilities at the time. And this has proved to be very well for the passengers utilizing that facility. Containerized vessels began discharging cargo at the Woodbridge Bay Port from September 23rd, despite the challenges of not being able to release them to the consignees. The business community was affected not only by Hurricane Maria, but with the destructive intervention of human hands, and could not clear containers about 5 weeks later. To speed up on the recovery effort, the airports were opened only for daytime commercial flights from October 6th. Electricity was provided to the airport on January 28th, thanks to DOMLEC. Prior to that period, the airport operated on diesel generators. More recently, the Douglas Charles Airport was cleared for night landing services from February 8th, 2018 by the Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Authority. All of the transit sheds at the Woodbridge Bay Port have been refurbished with new roofing material, with the exception of the shed number 4, which is occupied by the WFP, or the World Food Program. The covering of the roof of the transit shed in Portsmouth is now complete and expected to be put into service shortly. All of the ports of entry, with the exception of the Cambridge port, are connected fully now to the Domlec grid. The Rosa cruise ship berth received its first cruise ship call on January 28, 2018, with a visit by the cruise ship Men's Ship Free, operated by Turi Cruises with some 2,000 passengers. This was followed by a second cruise ship call on February 4, 2018 by Saga Holidays. The Men's Ship Free will continue to make calls until April of 2018. Efforts are continuing to have discussions with other cruise lines for calls to Dominica during the summer months this year, and winter season in October is ongoing. Clearly, given the massive response of relief and aid supplies into Dominica, with limited facilities, I want to remind you, a significant increase in the volume of containers arriving on island with an average of 300 containers weekly stretched the resources of the authority. Prior to Hurricane Maria, the authority only handled an average 80 containers per week. So that gives you an indication as to what we were up to, the challenge we were up to. As a result, a major gap developed in the timeliness of release of cargo to individuals and the business community. The volume of empty containers loaded by the vessels are relatively small, and it impacted on the space available at the port to store and release cargo effectively. The operational activity slowed down at the port given the challenges of inadequate space coupled with frequent breakdowns of equipment. Efforts to have the shippers load an increased number of empty containers did not materialize as effectively as the management of DASPA anticipated. Thus, alternative sites had to be sought to store the empty containers to alleviate the problem of full containers spending very long times at the port. Two locations were identified, namely the car park at the Woodbridge Bay Port and the Pottersville Savannah. These two areas have brought a measure of relief to the operational activity at the port, and delivery times have improved considerably to the business community, and a gradual increase in efficiency to individual consignees have also been achieved. New equipment was secured with the increase of an additional container stacker, and it has positively impacted on the movement and release of cargo at the port. Going forward, climate change as we know it, and the Prime Minister alluded to it, is real. And increased storms and rapid changes in meteorological events will continue to occur. Resiliency in relation to ports contain two main concepts: resistance to disruption, which we call preventive resiliency, and the ability to regain an acceptable level of function more quickly after disruption, which we call reactive resiliency. Thus, we need to ensure that we have systems in place to mitigate, adapt, to recover from shocks and stresses in a manner that reduces chronic vulnerabilities and facilities. No agency in Dominica, notwithstanding the level of preparation, was fully prepared for a Category 5+ hurricane on September 18, 2017. The destruction left behind had massive repercussions for all, resulting in a rippling effect of multiple hardship. As it relates to the ports of entry going forward, the following plan is under discussion. 1. Undertake an evaluation of the air and seaports preparedness in relation to human resource capability, training, plant and equipment installation, review adequacy of the infrastructure. The gaps identified will be designed or will source assistance through training to fully address the shortcomings. Security expert engineering advice on how to mitigate or adapt the infrastructure to minimize the risk. And we would look at Woodbridge Bay, Douglas Charles Seaport, and the other ports of entry. We also need to look at improving the drainage system to mitigate against flooding during heavy rainfall periods. Also, we need to look at building the appropriate berms and/or walls to prevent a repeat of a tropical storm Erica situation at the airport. We also need to harden the facilities where possible to withstand 200 miles per hour winds or Category 5+ conditions. Redesign or relocate the cruise port infrastructure to be better able to withstand high wave action. Conduct regular tabletop and other exercises to reinforce and validate the training programs. We also need to work closely with the port community business organizations, non-governmental organizations, government, disaster preparedness personnel on recovery issues. We also need to develop redundancies in areas of generating electricity through renewable energy resources. The development of a microgrid in the Marigot area would be an asset, not only to the airport, but for the general population within that area. We also need to develop policies aimed at making all the ports of entry greener ports. Given that our airports are located next to the shoreline and near major rivers, the need for a long-range airport that can accommodate larger aircrafts will reduce the total dependence on sea freight-only cargo coming into the island after a disaster. The further development of the cargo port in Portsmouth is also something that needs to be addressed to accommodate larger cargo vessels with the capability of at least 25 feet depth. It would lessen the dependence on large cargo vessels having to call only in Roseau. This would alleviate congestion at the ports, at the major port of entry, and create an alternate port with less impact on the coastal roads and vehicular traffic. We need to also build or reconstruct highly resilient port infrastructure, i.e., a new ferry terminal needs to be constructed. The current ferry terminal almost every year has to undergo repairs as a result of high sea wave action. It is a costly exercise and is in urgent need of review. As it relates to prevention, greater investment in employment risk reduction measures would seek to reduce the level of exposure to the air and seaport facilities. We need to take corrective measures. Corrective measures need to be put in place within a time frame based on resources available. Security gaps or weaknesses to be identified and addressed within a short time frame. Sensitive equipment to be stored in approved locations during extreme weather events to minimize loss and/or disruptions in the resumption of normal business operation. Redundancy in the provision of electrical power need to be established at all the ports of entry. The Woodbridge Bay Port needs to be redeveloped since it was designed for break bulk and banana export operation as far back as 1977. The current facility and layout do not meet the requirements for improved cargo flow logistics. If we have to improve the flow of cargo containers being loaded or offloaded from ships, the transit sheds need to be relocated. It may mean development of a new port or rehabilitation of the existing port to make it more resilient as a matter of priority. We have to prioritize our options in light of air transport, given the realities where our airports are located currently in the context of national priorities to reduce vulnerability and contribute to greater long-term development. As it was pointed out earlier, but I will repeat for emphasis, Dominica needs to build a long-range airport that will be cognizant of the issues of climate change and one that will be resilient in light of the issues of global warming, high sea swells, and flooding from rivers. The problems suffered as a result of Tropical Storm Erica and Hurricane Maria need not be repeated. Finally, let me say we need to engage with local, regional, and international institutions to employ disaster resilience strategies at our ports of entry. Our aim is to develop an air and seaport facility that can both avoid and mitigate damage and respond effectively after a disaster by re-establishing normal or near levels of operation in time so as to minimize damage to individuals as well as the business community that depend on the services that we offer. Let me take the opportunity to thank the government, the board, management and staff of DASPA for their commitment and dedication to duty during those difficult periods and support through the recovery period. Let me thank the public for their patience in moving cargo through the port in what can be considered an unprecedented movement of cargo in the life in the port of Dominica. Rest assured that the lessons learned will most definitely help us to work better and improve our efficiency. We want to assure all that we will grow out of the experiences from Hurricane Maria and lend our resources fully to the overall plan to make Dominica the world's first climate resilient country by working with all the stakeholders. Thank you.